All right, so Kateline, you got some guests in town. How's it going? What's the scoop?
Hanging in.
Okay. That was a pregnant pause right there.
It's day one. And
of 14.
Yeah. It's challenging.
Okay, but now can we say that one of those guests is Jillionaire, Kateline's mom, and noted 2020 watcher that we have tissed on this show many times? As I asked you via text, what are you guys watching? Is she going to be able to live without 2020 for 2 weeks? That's what I want to know.
Well, right now she's watching Dateline.
Okay, good.
She's
good.
in the other room as we speak watching Dateline.
She watching this one?
No.
I'm Lester Holt.
Howdy, Holt heads. Kurt Money here, alongside my co-host.
Kateline.
You guys, listen, that was fun. I'm not convinced the mic got that. You got to give that to me one more time, a little louder, dog.
Oh, no, we got it.
We are here to discuss the Dateline episode that aired April 12th of this year, 2024. And I've got an IMDb description for you that isn't bad, but it doesn't talk about the elephant in the room with this episode. So we'll discuss that. IMDb description is: a mother is found dead in a house fire, but an autopsy reveals a brutal murder. The case goes cold for years until a shocking confession is made. And even that's not 100% true. But believe it or not, the return of the great rookie, Blayne Alexander.
Yep.
Here's Blayne Alexander with Justice for Joy.
What did you think, Kateline, of this episode?
I liked it because the person I thought did it didn't do it.
Okay. Interesting.
I did not know right from the start who it was going to be.
This is good. I also thought there's something that happened at 14 minutes in that we'll discuss that made me take my hard line. But then stuff happened afterwards where I'm going like, wait, I have previous rules that would say it is that guy now based on what's happening. It wasn't bad because it could go a few different ways. So let's dive in. This story begins April 19th, 1991.
The day David Hibbs can never forget.
David Hibbs comes home from school and he's all excited because he's a 12-year-old and he had just gotten like an honor roll certificate. And he can't believe it because his mom's car's still in the driveway.
I was so excited to get home and show my mom.
And he gets closer to the house and that's when he sees black smoke coming out of the vents. His house is on fire. This kid flips out. My question to you is, does he run next door and somebody calls the cops, or do you think it was just a random call because there was a house on fire? Because we didn't get a 911 call or anything. They never discussed it.
Yeah, I bet someone saw the smoke and the flames and called. And he was busy storming into that house he saved the dog or the cat, or what was it?
The dog, but I think the dog was already outside because what was interesting is that David was saying how he was like kicking and punching and they had to like throw him in the ambulance for a little bit.
I was kicking and punching and trying to escape her grasp. A medic grabbed me and put me in the back of an ambulance.
Let's just assume the cops were called because the house was on fire and the neighbors were like, what's going on over here? Because this house is engulfed. So the fire department comes, and then also who comes home is the older sister, Jill?
16-year-old Angie was still at school when she heard about the fire.
She was excited to come home and check out her prom dress, which her and her mom had just bought. So she comes home and sees this chaos. House is on fire. The dog is safe, but where is mom? David is like, mom is still inside.
How did the puppy get out of this house and not my mom? None of it made sense.
And this is when we get, yet again, some firefighters on the show. Dateline loves some firefighters. And guess what? I feel like we do too, because these dudes were pretty sweet, huh? Did you like these guys?
These guys were great. They were so, still to this day, moved to tears thinking about that day.
Yeah.
They went in to extinguish the fire and they saw a body. And immediately they had to move out of the way because it was a crime scene. And the one firefighter said he thinks about it all the time. It's still maybe the hardest, the most upsetting one that they ever went to. And yeah, you could just tell that they don't take that stuff lightly.
The second that you started talking about it, you got emotional.
Yep. And I loved hearing him. I mean, obviously the story he was telling was sad, but I loved hearing him describe it because he's like, I tapped my buddy on the shoulder. I saw smoke. Look at this. Like, I just love knowing that one of his coworkers was nicknamed Smoke.
So I tapped my buddy on the back. I said, Smoke, there's a body. He shut the hose down. We got out.
That must be a quick nickname to be off the table at a firehouse. That's got to be the first one to go, right?
Oh, sure.
It's a pretty cool nickname. That's also the nickname of Tony Stewart, who is a NASCAR driver that you probably never heard of.
Oh, is that because he smokes everybody?
Yeah. Leaves him in his dust.
Yeah.
Okay, so the firefighters in there, yet they see a body. So they know this is a crime scene. They drop the hose. They get out of there. But while they're looking around, they also notice that this fire did not start in one spot. It was started in multiple areas.
3 spots.
This was arson.
And it was clearly murder, because what else do we find out down to the morgue? What do we find out about that body?
She did not die from burns or smoke inhalation.
No, there's no smoke in the lungs, but she was beaten, stabbed, and strangled to death. Joy Hibbs was murdered, and we got to find out who did it. So, of course,
Gotta be the husband.
gotta be the husband.
The husband is always the first suspect.
And we saw lots and lots of home movie footage
Oh, yes, we did.
of Joy, the family, the husband just filming him constantly and clearly in love with her and hitting on her.
Favorite part of the episode.
Here she comes. Well, hell, she's in a good mood, too.
When he's filming her from behind, it's like, look at that ass.
Yep, loved it.
Here we go. Look at that body. 35 years old. Look at that body.
So immediately I'm like, oh, he must have done it. This is probably just, we're tricked right now. We're being tricked into thinking that they were so in love, but actually things were terrible and he was awful. I thought that's what the twist was going to be.
Right, because at this point, we have not talked of current dad. We don't know where this husband is today. He's not being interviewed. We're talking to the siblings. We're talking to the 2 kids. We're talking to friends of the family. So you're right. It really is looking like, well, maybe this is the husband. So the cops, they're looking at the husband. He says he was at work in Philly proper doing construction and has a good alibi. That's what he says. So they take that and they're going to investigate.
At the time of the murder, he'd been doing construction work about 20 miles away in downtown Philly.
At the crime scene, they're talking about how a friend had seen a blue Monte Carlo parked the wrong way on the street and parked askew, like it was somebody in a hurry to go in and out. And that's when David says
April drives a blue Monte Carlo.
So that's when we learn about April and Robert Atkins, former neighbors but current friends of the Hibbs. They don't have very many pictures of either of them, because the pictures we see of Robert Atkins are pretty hysterical.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
They're, I want to say, much more recent, taken with some pretty shitty cell phones. This guy, I don't even know how I would describe him other than like a dumb meathead looking fool.
Yeah, the only pictures we see of him, he does look like a dumb meathead fool. Because I'm not kidding, there are 4 photos. 2 of them are in the same bathroom, and one of those 2 is shirtless. That was from the same moment, by the way. There's 2 shots that we see multiple times. This guy in some stupid sunglasses, shirtless, older, posing in the mirror with shirt on and off.
Yeah.
We see that picture so many times.
We don't see a photo of what he looked like in 1991, I don't think.
Well, we do, but it's photos from the side of like a family get together and he's like sitting next to grandma in a chair.
Yeah.
But they were no good too. So my heart goes out to the production team on this app of being like, okay, we have 4 photos of Robert Atkins that we have to make work in a 2-hour episode, okay?
Yeah.
But they just plant this seed here. The Atkins, former neighbors, their friends.
April would be over at the house a lot. She and Joy became close because they both had kids, they both love kids, and they would kind of help each other and confide each other as mothers and parents. But the Atkins moved away, still close by, but they used to be right next door.
I can remember her holding April's son, and it was just a natural connection, I think, as 2 women neighbors hitting it off.
So people in the neighborhood and other friends in their circle knew that they had this Monte Carlo, but when the cops looked into it, the only Monte Carlo that was registered to Robert's name was a black Monte Carlo, not a blue one.
Which is not a deal breaker to me, Kateline. Because obviously someone can mistake a dark blue for black. I mean, this doesn't seem insane, right?
That's true. And also, the person who saw the car, wasn't she like a teenager at the time?
It was the sister's friend.
Right. So it was a teenager.
It was a Monte Carlo, but it was not the color of the car that was out front of the house.
And I'm not saying that teenagers can't be trusted and don't have eyes, but teenagers can't be trusted and don't have eyes.
Yeah.
Also, the cops looked into where they were, and they had taken a trip up to the mountains.
Poconos, supposedly.
That day. So they were checked into a hotel. That was their alibi, so it couldn't have been them anyway.
Then he and April took the kids on a trip to the Pocono Mountains, about 2 hours away.
But they weren't there that day, but who was there was like the pastor in town because they had signed up.
Joy had some visitors, a pastor and his assistant from a local Baptist church.
Pastor had been there like an hour before Joy was supposedly murdered.
Yeah, and
right?
So then I'm like, oh, well, he did it.
Yeah, it's this pastor. What's he up to?
I'm very distrusting of the clergy. He did it.
Yep, bingo.
Nope.
He was at the dentist. Another solid alibi.
Yep, he didn't do it.
He didn't do it. But we learn a little bit more about the connection of the Atkins and the Hibbs. And this is right after the murder. This all happens in 91 when this is all discussed, where they find out there had been a small rift because Robert Atkins was a drug dealer. Okay, and he sold them weed from time to time.
Charlie had bought some marijuana from Robert.
And David, a 12-year-old, had overheard an argument that was so loud. It was his mom on the phone with Robert Atkins, holding the phone away from her face, and he could hear him screaming. And she has no choice but to tell Dave the sitch because here's this guy screaming. And we find out that they had spent $20 for a bag of weed. And the dad had said that it was all seeds and stems. This I love, too, that David remembered that phrase. Because that is a very real phrase.
Oh, yeah.
And I can specifically remember hearing my dad say something to the effect of, it's all seeds and stems.
They paid $20 for weed that was no good, and they wanted a refund. Now, Charlie Hibbs, the husband, told Joy to take care of it.
Your dad wanted me to return this marijuana that wasn't good, and now Robert Atkins is threatening me.
But the point is, this seeds and stems comment made it back to Robert Atkins' ears, and he flipped the F out, okay, and was very pissed off about it. But like we said, he was in the Poconos, so he couldn't have done it. Mm-hmm. But there was also something going on weeks before her death. There were certain things happening that they thought maybe were like rowdy kids or friends of the kids in high school messing with them because they got like a brick through the window, and there was something else that happened, right?
Something with their car?
All 4 tires of her car were slashed.
Now, when I hear on a Dateline about stuff happening to the house like this, specifically targeting the wife, it sounds like, because it was her car, to me, I go, husband. This is the husband. We've seen it in the past, right?
We've seen it in the past.
With the penis pics, of course, that were playing around the house. That was the husband.
Emails with penis photos on them.
And I was thinking that here, too. Because at this point in the Dateline, I don't know, we're like 30 minutes in, we don't know the whereabouts of Charlie Hibbs, the husband and father. Now, at 14 minutes into the episode, I looked at the time because I don't know what it is. I feel like anytime I find something in the episode where I go, hard line, this is when I say this is the person that did it. It's always in the 12 to 15 minute range. And it happened here, too, because like you mentioned, that video of Charlie Hibbs and Joy Hibbs when she came home from work and he was like being sweet to her with the camera, talking about she had stress for him and he's like 35 and still banging bod. That to me was the most heartwarming, touching part of the episode because it to me, it said really in love, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like those moments, that was, I don't miss being in relationships, but those are the parts I do miss from time to time.
Good, honey.
So yeah, there were a few great home video moments because not only this part, the husband talking about her butt and her hair and how she's got a new do and it's California style. I love the whole thing.
New hairdo, she's going California style now.
And then there's this other great part where they're giving a tour of David's room and David tells his mom to get out of his room. And what does she say to him?
Well, excuse me for living.
Yeah, it's so good.
Classic.
It is so good.
Classic mom line.
Oh.
I laughed out loud.
Well, this is my bedroom. Mom, get out of my bedroom, please.
Excuse me for living.
So, I mean, this thing, it sounds like we've got a pretty good lead with this Atkins fella. But for whatever reason, this thing goes cold pretty quickly, does it not?
For a long time.
The case had gone cold.
And this whole time that the husband, Charlie, he like cleaned up his act because he was like a biker dude.
Right.
So he feels obligated to be clean shaven and stuff so that he can like present a good face forward as like a dad who did not kill his wife.
Yeah, and also he became in charge of the family now. He said he had to learn how to pay bills and pay the mortgage and go to student teacher conferences and be presentable and not look like a biker.
Maybe not be so scary. I don't know.
Not that there's anything wrong with looking like a biker. Certainly now it's like millennial dads all look like that. But back then,
yeah,
I think he wanted to put on a good face.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because now today, most all cops are sleeved up with tattoos and have pointy beards that they manicure. Like, that's the look now, so it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
But back then, he felt obligated to clean up. But yeah, this thing goes cold for a while. They keep living. But the cloud of suspicion is on the dad.
Yeah.
And so much so that So they grow up, and David goes out to, he lives in Portland, and he goes to New York City. But on one trip back in 2006, because nothing's been doing with this case, he goes to the Bristol Township Police Department and says, hey, can I just get a copy of my mom's case file to see if we can get some new eyes on it? Like maybe hire a private eye or something. And they say, no, of course not. I mean, it's just gathering dust back here. And we hadn't thought about it until you just mentioned it, David. But no, we do not give you permission.
He said the police rejected his request.
But one of the guys comes out and tells him specifically, well, that's okay because we know who did it. It was your fucking dad, dude. Your dad did it.
Mm-hmm.
He was certain that it was my father's fault.
What do you think about that, Kateline?
If that happened, isn't that like against protocol? If you have an open case, it's again like we had in the last episode where you can't just say who the suspects are.
Yeah.
If you're not actively pursuing them or working on a case.
Yeah.
I mean, but it is an active case, so it's like, I didn't think you could go around saying who your lead suspect is to the public, let alone to the son of the victim.
Yeah. The son who came in and wants stuff to be done about the case. You tell him, no, nothing can be done on it, but don't worry, it was your dad.
Right.
And David takes that info. He didn't think it was his dad. That was a shock to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he was floored of like, wait, what? So now he's thinking in his head in 2006, maybe it was my dad.
That is terrible.
And so because of what this cop says, now he doesn't talk to his dad for years on end.
He pulled completely away. We barely communicated. I didn't know that it was the police that was causing the problem.
The years go, nothing happens with this case until 2014, when David gives an interview to Huffington Post and accuses the cops of botching the investigation. And yet again, we find ourselves, you got to be an asshole if you want anything done, right?
All of a sudden, they've got time for it.
Interesting.
Interesting.
He did the old Mama Dodge move, just bug the cops incessantly until they were forced to deal with his case.
Police must have been like, just get out of our business.
So that's when they assigned Sergeant Mike Slaughter to the case.
The police department assigned a new detective, Mike Slaughter.
One of our greatest detective names, Mike Slaughter's up there. And it's particularly funny because this is one soft-spoken mother right here.
Wife, mom gets murdered. I don't even know about it. Many of us didn't even know about it.
He takes over this case. And of course he does what they all do. What you got to do when you take over a case, you start from the beginning. Fresh eyes. So he starts looking and he's shocked at what he sees, which is a lack of stuff to see. Because not one interview was recorded or documented. Not one. What are we thinking about this right now? So he's looking at the old file. There's nothing in there.
Crazy. They were really fixated on the dad.
Yeah.
And they had nothing on him because he didn't do it. So that was it. Case closed. He did it.
Yeah.
But we got nothing.
So Detective Slaughter, now that he's on it, he starts interviewing people again. And he goes to Charlie Hibbs and he's got to go through it again. He's like, look, I'm going to ask you some tough cues. But Charlie answers him truthfully. He pretty much clears Charlie right away based on alibi and interviewing him. Mm-hmm. He's like, oh, the husband did not do it.
And we finally see Charlie.
Yeah, you're right.
And he's not in a prison jumpsuit.
No.
He's all aged and distinguished with his gray beard, silver beard and everything.
I think they played it all very well very good with the dad. Mm-hmm. And I fell for it pretty much every step. I don't know if we give that shout out to Blayne.
I think we can.
Or the producer. But yeah, I say we give it to Blayne. Well done, Blayne.
Yep.
So I got to say this. Joy Hibbs was an attractive woman. And, well, scratch that. I just want to point out I'm so glad that her eyes were passed on to her kids. They both had pretty nice eyes. And they were Joy's eyes exactly.
The daughter was really pretty.
Okay, what's up? Are you going to diss David? I think David had it too. I think they both had her eyes exactly, and they were both pretty striking looking.
Maybe, but I was feeling the daughter.
Fair. Their eyes kind of point up, but one of them points up a little higher than the other one. Anyway, anytime I saw the pics, I was like, boom. Oh, also, speaking of the pics, there's a great shot of Charlie and Joy on a Harley. It's the kind of picture that somebody would post on Instagram of like, this was my parents when they got married. They're such badasses. You know the shot I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
She has like a black tank top on and she's all smiling, holding the beer. Anyway, it was pretty dope. So Slaughter's on the case. He's looking into it. And actually, he's looking into Atkins. And he's going through Atkins' alibi. And it turns out he specifically says it's not an alibi.
It's not.
Because all the things that he offers for an alibi are things that happened after the murder.
Mm-hmm. He says that at the time of the murder, he was actually home on the phone. A very long phone call. And then as soon as he got off the phone, they all hopped in the car and drove up to the mountains. And I believe they said that they had by like 3 p.m. they were all checked in, but that is not what Slaughter finds out when he does some digging.
No, he finds out that April did not sign in at that place in the Poconos until like 5:15, 4 hours after the murder. And they do the math, and the drive is 2 hours or something. Like, it's not a 4-hour drive.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, their Pocono thing is right here, has no bearing on the case. It happened hours after the murder.
They're not alibis. They're not alibis. They're post-crime.
He goes to April, interviews her again, and now we're thinking years later, surely they were divorced. So if April's got something to say, she's surely going to tell us now. But she doesn't.
Nope.
She's got nothing to say. And so he's got to focus on talking to the original investigators. And here's the kicker of this whole app. The punch in the gut that answers everything. Detective Slaughter is trying his best to talk to, like, the investigating officer at the time of the murder. He just wants to talk to them again to be like, you know, what's going on? Why didn't you do anything?
The others straight up refused to talk to Slaughter at all. Wouldn't talk to him.
Yeah.
If that doesn't say you're guilty of some shady police corruption, what does?
I said, one way or another, we have to talk. I'll go there every day. I'm going to the house every day. I'm knocking on the door, knocking on the window until he talks to me.
And he was that resistant to talking with you.
Now, this is somebody who was the police chief that I was hired on.
Finally gets to talk to this guy. He talks to the detective that had the case at the time. And he tells Slaughter, I was told to stay away from Robert Atkins. And why was Robert Atkins untouchable, Kateline?
It turns out he was an informant.
A fucking CI.
The former detective told Slaughter that he started to pursue Robert Atkins back in 1991, but then...
He said that Robert Atkins was an informant.
A police informant.
Correct.
He was working narcotics as a local drug dealer and sending information to the cops. So he was untouchable.
Yeah, and I mean, Slaughter himself is emotionally floored by this news because he's as shocked as we are. How they had their eyes on this guy in 91. Why is it that it stalled and nothing happened? And now it all makes sense. Because this guy was a friggin' CI.
This may have been a murder suspect that was traded in exchange for drug deals, which are not a dime a dozen, they're a penny a pound. We get drug intel all the time.
Him being a murderer isn't as important as the narcotics department getting a couple drug leads. Like, a woman is dead.
Yeah.
And you, caught a couple teenagers selling weed because of it? And that's your win?
They were told to stay away from Bob Atkins, and they did. And they have to look in the mirror at that.
He was selling weed.
Well, he also made and sold meth. I did look into that because I had that same question. Because I'm going, how powerful could this guy be as a drug dealer? If he's doing deals for shitty weed for $20, he's not very big time, even if he does make meth. So I would ask all these people at the time, what is it that you think you're getting in return for this? Because I don't know what you could say that would justify letting him walk for a murder.
Mm-hmm. Unless the cops were buying drugs from him.
Yeah, that too. But Slaughter thinks he's put together a pretty good case. He hands it over to the DA, and then 2 months later, he gets a call from the police department. He gets a call that says, hey, this some lady named April wants to talk to you. Do you know what I'm talking about? And he goes, I shot down there. Like he couldn't fly fast enough to the police station.
Some woman here says it's really important. Her name's April Atkins. I said, I'm on my way.
You run down to the station.
He goes down there. April wants to talk again. And now we get to talk to old April herself because she's in the hot seat with Blayne. Tell us about this.
April, are you here by your free will?
Yes.
And you have something in your hand there. What's that in your hand there?
This is your card I've been keeping
that I gave you?
since. Yes.
April was a little bit of a character.
She was.
Just a little bit.
She tells us that Robert was abusive and extremely volatile and terrifying. And that...
Well, specifically...
She says that he came into the house that day after the murder and said that he just killed someone.
Well, he was covered in blood, and she said, what the hell just happened? And he said, I stabbed somebody and set their house on fire.
He didn't say who.
Nope.
But he said that, and she was, I think, a little shell-shocked and also living in fear of him, so she didn't say anything. And he demanded that they get in the car and head for the mountains, and that's what they did.
At some point in the Poconos, he buys a new pair of shoes. They went for a walk in the woods, and he has a bag. And then when they're done with the walk, he doesn't have the bag anymore. Interesting, right?
The bloody clothes.
I love the interrogation footage, just the conversation between Detective Slaughter and April, because he was like, April, look, thank you so much for coming in. And she's like, oh my God, you believe me? Like she's like touched. Remember that part?
Yes.
That was very sweet.
April, I want to thank you for coming in, okay?
You really believe me?
I believe you.
That was very sweet.
It was like, you watch Homeland?
No.
Oh.
I watched the first few seasons.
There's that moment in season 2 where Saul tells Carrie that Brody actually is a terrorist, and she's like crying. I was right. I'm not crazy. And he's like, you were right. It's like that.
Ooh, that's good. I do kind of remember that.
I was right. Responsible for atrocities, they were never held accountable.
You were right.
So they ask her to record a conversation with Robert to see if she can get him to admit anything.
Right.
And she agrees to do it.
I forgot about
this. And the phone call is basically useless. I mean, if anything, we just see an example of how awful he is and angry, but he doesn't admit to anything.
So we hear this conversation, and boy, I loved April and Robert's dynamic together. It was pretty amusing. They're playing the recording, and she says, "Are you paying attention?" And he goes, "Well, I wasn't, but I am now."
Are you paying attention to me?
I wasn't, but I am now.
Like, you sound like an angry, drunk Frosty the Snowman.
Hey, I said my first word, but snowmen can't talk.
Okay.
You remember what Frosty sounded like?
Yeah.
Happy birthday!
I didn't do anything. I don't know what the you're talking about.
That's very Frosty-like. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, if you're mentally handicapped,
yeah,
like, he was really going after her.
He was going after her mental illness, which that's a low blow. But he's a bad person.
Yeah. So here's what's nuts, though, is they get this recording. It's not very helpful other than to hear them talk to each other. And we also got to hear them say the word tickle 3 times in 2 seconds. Remember when they tickled the line or whatever?
We try and tickle a conversation.
Tickle a conversation?
Tickle a conversation.
They just want to scare him a little bit to make him act on it.
What do you know? I'm even ticklish.
But I think they went wrong in setting her up at a hotel, and they record her call, and she's like, "I'm at a hotel right now, and the cops are downstairs waiting to talk to me. What should I say to them?" Even if Robert was not wise to the tap, he still would not say anything then, because it's obviously potentially recorded. If she's... Right?
Yes.
Don't you think that they tickled the wrong way? They didn't tickle properly.
They were tipping their hand a little too much. They should have had her call from her cell phone and just record that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so when all this stuff goes down with April, this is like 2016, but the trial doesn't happen for another 5 years, which sounds insane, and a lot of people have questions about it. They hold a press conference in 2021 when they announced that they arrested the guy. And everybody's first question and second and third question is, why did it take so long? Not since 91. Why did it take so long since 2016? Mm-hmm. You've had this information for 5 years.
The DA's like, all I can say is that it took longer than it should, but we're here now, or some nonsense.
I think he plays it the only way that he possibly can, I think.
It's not his fault.
Was his alibi checked out thoroughly at the time?
That's a fair question, Joe.
No, and I feel like he's playing it bashful enough where he's saying what we're thinking, which is, this was a up before our time and it sucks.
We have to answer for their shitty behavior.
I don't understand how they justified it, because he wasn't, like, I wouldn't think it was worth it even if this was a Departed situation. This was Jack Nicholson we're talking about.
You're gonna take Costello, huh? I mean, he murdered somebody, right?
Like, even in that case, I'd say, I don't know, dude, this murder is pretty, like, in your face and cocky. It seems like a real problem.
This guy might have thought he was in the mob, but he wasn't. There was no reason for this.
Right.
He was just some local drug dealer.
Yeah, but the cops were... I'm just really upset at cops that can do this and live their lives and then die peacefully in their late 60s before people find out about it.
Late 60s.
It upsets me, Kate, and it's only going to happen more.
No, I'm laughing because late 60s, that's not that old.
Well, I don't think I'm making it in my late 60s. But anyway, not a fun convo. Will be even less fun in 20 years.
Late 60s is not old for women. That's like midlife right there.
That's true. That's when your life can start then. When that hubby dies, Get him the out of here.
Yep.
Look, you know how after World War II, for a while, we were rounding up all these Nazi generals and stuff, and we were like prosecuting them. And they were like, well, it was my job. There was that phrase that they had, right? Like I was following orders.
Yeah, Nuremberg trials.
Is there some sort of legislation we can get going to get all the dirty cops from back in the day in this same way? I want to punish people for the way that they were cops back then. Do you see what I'm saying?
You remember when...
Kateline, I don't want to let this rest.
You remember when Slaughter had to get up and take a break because it was so upsetting for him to talk on other cops? Cop on cop slander. He was like, this is hard. I don't want to do it. These are good people. And it's like, are they? I don't know.
It's cops on cops.
Yeah, well... Surely we'll be discussing that part more in detail in an upcoming segment. All right, so he goes to trial, and what's nuts about the trial is here are the things that were not allowed to be permitted. April's phone call with him, not permitted.
I wasn't, but I am now.
April saying that when he came home on April 19th, 1991, that he was covered in blood and stuff. None of that was admitted. Isn't that crazy?
The thing that kept it from going to trial wasn't even used in the trial.
Oh, and then once it was announced that Robert Atkins was arrested, Slaughter starts getting calls from Atkins' family members that are like, oh, thank you for arresting this guy, because by the way, when he was 15, he went over to his aunt's house, left her naked and bloody, wrapped up in a towel, left her for dead. That happened when he was 15. Also, not allowed to talk about that at trial. Now, I get it. A minor, blah, 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 blah. Is there a scenario where maybe these types of crimes we should know or no? Do you think the jury should know if he did that kind of thing as a kid, like attacked a woman?
It's a slippery slope. Obviously, if we're doing a case-by-case basis, yes. But as a general law, that could be tough.
You're right. Slippery slope. Whatever. Look, dude, I'm just mad at these cops. I'm mad that half of them are dead and the other half just refuse to talk. And they get to live their life and stuff. It's frustrating because, like, not only was Joy murdered, but, like, the family was ruined. Like, there was a decade where David thought his dad did it because the cops told him that.
It wasn't good. Of all times, we needed to be together.
Well, hopefully they can make up for lost time. And Robert was found guilty. Despite not being able to use any of that evidence, he got life.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. All the stuff they weren't allowed to use, and he was still found guilty.
Robert Atkins was guilty of first-degree murder.
All right, well, I think it's list time. What do you say?
Kate's unnamed list.
I know you got something tonight.
Okay, there is a Florida connection.
What is it?
Charlie and Joy met in Florida.
That's great.
And then they moved back up to Bristol.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I'll count it.
Joy and their dad Charlie met in high school in Florida.
Then we also have Detective Slaughter having to pause the interview to go walk away and cry. I don't know that he actually said I'm sorry and apologized.
He did. He did. When he came back, he said sorry. He did.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
I listened for it because I thought he has to say sorry or I feel like Kateline is going to try and say this isn't it. This, to me, is the biggest example of this list item.
I guess, but it seemed to me that he apologized for pausing the interview and walking away, not necessarily for shedding your tears.
And it is nuts. It's because of this cop-on-cop stuff.
Right, like that's what got him emotional.
Why did you have to take a break?
It's cops on cops.
Just last week, we were discussing list items and the scarcity of some. I just thought this was like Kate's unnamed list item on a platter.
Well, there's also a new list item.
Ooh! Okay, I also have a new list item. I wonder if it's the same thing. Hit me.
It's not.
What's your item?
It's the car stuff. If there's a car anywhere in the case that is maybe a clue, a piece of evidence, or a link to something, it's going on my list. And in this case,
hell yeah,
this blue Monte Carlo
car stuff.
Somebody found old photos of the Atkins where it looked like there was a blue Monte Carlo in the background. So he may have had access to it. We're still not sure on that. But
somebody who was in the photo said that's the car in the background. It does not look like a blue Monte Carlo. It looks like a blue shade or something, right? Like the photo does not look like a car.
I thought it did. I just couldn't be certain of the color. But again, we can't be certain of what the color of the car was. It could have been his usual black.
Yeah, I feel like there should be a spectrum of colors for witnesses where, like, if they said yellow, I know that it's not mistaking it for black.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if it's black, purple, brown, dark blue, those should all be in the same category when it comes to witnesses' stories.
But it was not the color.
My husband used to have a car that was like 6 different colors, and not like it had each panel colored a different color. It was, the car, I guess, was technically champagne, but sometimes it was gold, sometimes it was silver, sometimes it was tan, sometimes it was like brown, all depending on the lighting and the time of day. Mm-hmm. So if you've got something like that, and a lot of cars now are that dark gray that can sometimes look black or can sometimes look purple.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you. Yeah, so is that it for your list?
That's it.
That's pretty good. But you had a big one and you had a new item.
I'm happy about this new item.
That's good stuff.
Because this is like the 4th one we've had now where a car has been involved.
Absolutely. I think it's a great addition.
We had Rex Heuermann's Forest Green Avalanche. Then we had
Joanna Hayes' truck with the black trim.
Joanna Hayes' white F-150.
Mm-hmm.
This Monte Carlo. And then there was one more. It was that SUV with that extra trim.
Yeah.
That
trim package stuff.
The trim package stuff that those car salesmen recognized as one that they had sold.
Boom. That is very true. All right, now it's on to Kurt's Kick-Ass List.
Kick-Ass List.
I was not given any treats really in this episode. I've got a list item, but barely. I'm squeaking it in there just so it's not a goose egg. The kid in the picture is wearing a Dick Tracy shirt. And so that's a movie.
Okay.
And since I talked about the demons last time, that opens the floodgates. Now, anytime there's a person wearing a shirt with a movie on it, Kurt Money is going to bring it up. It counts.
It counts.
How you feel about that?
I like it.
I watched Dick Tracy again recently for a podcast. A lot of people love to talk about how it's underrated. I think it's a fine film, and I think it's rated exactly how it should be. Are you with me?
I haven't seen that movie since I was maybe 9, 8.
It shouldn't be bigger than it is all I'm trying to say about Dick Tracy.
And that's fine. Some movies are what they are, and we love them for it.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
What's the matter? You bums forgot how to kill people? Doesn't your work mean anything to you anymore?
And now the new addition to Kurt's Kick-Ass List. Okay, it was Slaughter said it, and it was when he said Eureka moment.
This is a Eureka moment?
I feel like the blank moment gets said a ton. One guy in particular loves to say it, okay? Mr. Dennis Murphy says aha moment all the damn time.
It was an aha moment.
But aha moment, Eureka moment, any of these things, that's on my list.
Light bulb
moment, that's in there too. Absolutely. They love it. So that's on my list.
I like it.
This is a big, big moment.
Cool. All right. So next week, I do not know. But the next one after that is called Chameleon because it's the FF word. Forensic foul.
You are so excited. Oh, man.
I know.
What if it... okay. Hopefully it doesn't let you down.
Listen, the funniest thing is going to be if it was a last day. I mean, what's going to happen to my brain if that was an old last day? I'm not going to know what to do, Kate. I guess we'll find out.
We'll find out.
That's going to do it. I'm Kurt Money.
I'm Kateline.
I'm Lester Holt. For all of us, I'm Lester Holt. Good night.
I wasn't, but I am now.